Greetings, everyone. This is Timothy Youngs, the Digital Apothecary, and I thought I'd talk about something that I've been wanting to put together, but haven't had time. And now that it's on the holidays, I do have time, so now it's time to do it. And basically, something that always comes up I find very interesting is people ask, like, what is the job that I do? Um, and I actually have a very hard time explaining it, to be quite honest, because it is very multifaceted. Um, at the end of the day, I'm an associate professor of pharmacy practice. So, what does that mean? Most pharmacy programs are 4 years. I work for a 3 year program, and that means it's accelerated. So, I teach year round. Um, Sometimes, I think the longest break I get is probably during the Christmas season when I have this year 2 weeks off. Usually, it's about a week and a half. Um, But otherwise, there's a week between semesters, time for me to catch up, and then go back to teaching. So I kind of, for myself, always think of either fall semester, spring semester, and summer semester. Because that's usually just where my life falls into place with all these things. And in terms of like what my schedule is like, it depends on basically what the semester is. And in some cases, for instance, like since it's a 3 year program, we call them P1s, P2s, and P3s. And in the P1 year, I really don't teach too much for them until the summer when I offer an elective on digital health, which I can have up to 20 students in. And then I teach on and end courses like self care, burns, and wounds in the summer. And then there's a few other classes I teach intermittently throughout the P1 year. And then P2 year, I'm a coordinator. And this is something I always gets confused. So, like, when you talk about being a coordinator for a class, what that means is you basically help run the class. You may not even teach if you coordinate a class. You just basically help, like, manage exams, manage the other lecturers or professors, make sure everything's going well, deal with student assignments and such. So, it's a lot of back end work, I would say. And that can be a pain depending on the course and how it's designed. So, I do basically care labs or patient care seminars, um, and these are held year round. But I take two of them in the spring and the summer. So spring tends to be my busiest because it's like in there. There's about like 5 lectures I give, and then there's about let's say about 8 labs. Each lab is about 3 hours long, and then a practical. So I have to like help coordinate all that stuff. That includes doing like blood pressure assessments, how to teach people how to use inhalers, how to document use soap notes, how to do patient presentations, how to deal with special populations. So it's fun. I mean, it's a lot of organization on that stance. And then my dead time of the year tends to be the fall because of the fall I don't teach too much. So P1, P2 year is a lot of didactic or basic lectures and laboratory works. And there's breakout sessions that I help out with. So I maybe, like this past week, I had probably about, mm, I would say about 6 hours. I was not teaching necessarily, but basically you can call it teaching, you can call it not teaching. It depends. Like for me and my self-report reviews, they don't count as teaching. They actually count as basically being a facilitator. But I have a classroom of anywhere between 20 and 30 students. They have assignments, and I oversee it. So like it could be like going over a journal club article. It could be like patient presentations, things like that. So I give grades and feedback to students. Usually I have someone else in the room to help out. Sometimes they're just APPE students or rotation students. And that brings me to the next part is for me, I have 6 rotations throughout the year. Each one's 6 weeks long, so it's 36 weeks out of 52 weeks. I am basically precepting students on what's called Advanced Pharmacy Practice Experiences, or APPEs. And this goes into P3 year, which are basically rotations. And that basically means I spend 2 to 3 days a week on campus, 2 to 3 days a week at a offsite um, clinical site where I oversee students that basically have some kind of patient engagement role. So for me, I work at home healthcare. I used to work at a outpatient heart failure clinic, and in all these roles, what I basically do is like comprehensive medication management or overviewing medications with patients with my students. So I'll assign my students cases of that's coming down from the care team, have them basically look over the patient, and then they'll see the patient and what they have to do is they basically have to document for me, or kind of do like some kind of pre-assessment saying, hey, this is basically when I think about the patient. We discuss it. I tell them whether I think they're right or wrong, what they can improve on, guide them through that, and then they'll engage with the patient. This could be education. This could be checking on like side effects or issues that they identified when doing this medication review. So, for instance, it may be um, patient has what could be side effects, and we want to determine that, so we go do patient interview or education on this, or clarify medication therapy, especially if there's issues going on with it, and then we report back to the team, make recommendations, and then follow up on that. So this is all happening at the same time. And then there's also like this is like the one part of the job that I think a lot of students see, is that they'll see the professors who during their first few years, a 4-year program or a 3-year program, first 1 to 2 or 3 years, they're in the classroom and they may see the professor on campus. They might engage in research if they choose to, but otherwise, the professor is just this person comes in and like lectures to them, oversees their activities, and that's kind of it. And I always think that's a shame, because then what ends up happening is the students will end up on rotation, and then they'll talk to us because they're stuck with us now 40 hours a week for 6 weeks, and they actually now to get to realize like we're people, and then they ask us more questions. And inevitably, what I think is always hilarious is a lot of my students will end up being like, "Man, I wish I talked to you more before. Like you have some stuff that we could have talked about." And I'd be like, "Yeah," and that's a shame, because opportunities to engage with students and like develop these interpersonal relationships has to almost be like pursued, I think, by students. And I often tell students my biggest thought is that pharmacy school isn't just about the grades you make, it's also about the hands you shake. This includes networking outside in terms of the job that you eventually want. This could be like residency, post grad fellowship, and etc. But it's also using faculty. I mean, you're paying all this money to go to school to basically be taught, and you also establishing all these connections, and faculty can serve as that, and I can help you basically navigate further. So one thing, for instance, I do is I'll take students that are interested in clinical or in fellowships or industry, and I'll try staying with my personal contacts. I mean, I have friends that are across all different spaces, and if I was to say I'm really interested in this, so I'll be like, well, let's see if I can just set you up with lunch with someone, and then you can meet with them and talk with them. And that I always has found to be a great strength I can offer students, is if I don't have an answer for them, at least I know someone that may, and I can help them network better. And it's something I think that some students realize early on or just too late. That's always a shame. So anyway, back to like this job. So like things that I get always asked is, what do you do? And it's basically a mix between, in pharmacy practice, having a clinical site, it's a mixture of teaching and precepting, overseeing students, patient care services, and that is one that's I think seen by a lot and like really embraced heavily, and that can be understood I think by a lot of people. The one thing that's very difficult to explain is this topic area of service, and service is this concept of basically serving on committees, and this, for instance, could be like admissions, like reviewing candidates that are trying to apply for pharmacy school. It could be task forces in terms of changing and stuff. So like a lot of universities will, and especially in pharmacy, will have like committees that are set up for like student professor relationships, student could be our own internal government services, like Senate. It could be working with clubs. Like I serve as an advisor for Asian Student Alliance on my campus. Um, it could be community outreaches. So there's a bunch of different things out there. And then there's also national service. So you could work for like national organizations. So in pharmacy, like ASHP, APHA, you could serve state and local. And then there's national and conferences that you have to go to and attend and do things. So I've served as chair for some different committees at different organizations over the years. And that's work that you have to do as well. So there's always like meetings going on. I would say that's the bane of my job. That's probably one thing I loathe, and I don't think anyone that even goes in academia, especially in like this pharmacy job, going into academia realizes how much is like dedicated towards just meetings. I keep track of my time and how much I work. So on average, I work between 40 to 50 hours a week, and I would say 50 is probably my average. Um, and that's because I also engage in a lot of other like things that go on. Um, but so one of the biggest things is then talking about the service idea is that it just you'll have like things like, okay, we have a meeting today, we'll have a meeting like another day. So like I mentioned earlier, like you have a lot of things you're bouncing off. So like one day I may have to go in and teach in the morning for 2 hours or do a lab. That's gonna be my morning, and then I will have a meeting, and then I will have to go meet with my APPE students, go over cases and such, and maybe do a discussion on diseases, or listen to their present, or maybe we'll do a journal club and talk about an article, and then I may go to another meeting, or I might go back and teach. So there are days where I have driven to campus, done a meeting, go to my clinical site to see my students, and then have to hop on a call halfway through to do a meeting and then hop back with my students. So there's always multiple things that you are basically juggling. So time management skills, I think, is probably one of the biggest things in academia you need to have. And quite frank, even for me, it's like I've had to figure out how to do this well. Like I use a lot of Google is like my lifesaver, Google Calendar, Task, and such. But I also use different programs like Microsoft Teams. I use with my students. For instance, I had them on a workspace where we can like have chats, and then if I need to, I can actually hop onto a call with them remotely and talk about and go over like different presentations or answer quick questions they have. Um, and it's just keeping up on communication, email, and email is like huge. Like you just get hundreds of emails. I feel like throughout the week. Um, and some of them are just like you look at them just like, okay, it's an update, or this is important, and you're trying to constantly just keep be like, what tasks do I have to do, what comes up here. Today, for instance, I had a lot of grading I had to get done, so I would probably spend about maybe 2 hours grading, basically like reflections from a class. So you have to read over that, have some drug consults out, another class I was facilitating. Again, I'm not even teaching this stuff, I'm just helping grading with this material and reading over drug consults that were assigned and going through a rubric, assigning the grades, uploading them onto Blackboard. That all takes time. So I think that's a big like misnomer about like pharmacy academia is it's not even like I would say teaching. Like if you actually talk about like percent time I spend in a classroom teaching is probably less than 10% of my job. I would say that. So like if people are like interested in going to pharmacy academia, like I want to be this professor and I want to go and teach in front of a room, that's not going to be the majority of your job. Odds are, unless you go to a very small university and need all hands on deck, I would say if you're in a moderate to large size program, 20% of your less of your job is going to be directly teaching. I would say a lot of your job is going to be administrative and service based, which is basically meetings, grading, coordinating classes, overseeing stuff, office work, like sitting in the back and like going through the stuff, coordinating with others, going and handling student issues and such that come around. Um, and that's the other thing, like meetings with students, because I will get students that email me like, "Oh, I want to talk to you about this topic. Oh, can we talk about like if I can help you with research? I just want to pick your brain on this. Also, I don't like my grade I got. I want to argue about this. If you're a course coordinator and another professor graded a certain way, student will come to you, and then you have to basically say, do you back up the other professor? Do you want to finagle this? Like, how do you handle it all? Or let's suppose they like failed an exam, and you're like, well, how do we go about this and such? So there's constantly this background work that you kind of have to basically be able to pivot on at a moment's notice to handle some things that may come up that just need to be tackled as quick as possible. And then like I feel like in academia, you're always like thinking years out, like you're redeveloping courses and classes and lectures. Like for instance, on my campus, one of the committees I'm in charge of is basically a NAPLEX readiness committee, so helping our students prepare to take the NAPLEX. Um, we have like study stuff, and we have like other resources we offer students. But the big thing is just trying to coordinate like these study programs throughout the year. So it's a longitudinal thing, and I rarely like get this little time window to basically, fix things. So it's like, okay, we launched again. We'll have like 6 meetings throughout the year just talking about if we're on task or not, and then we have like maybe a few weeks of dead time, and then we restart because we're accelerated program because we're always constantly going. So while you're doing all this, you also have to. So we talk about teaching, which for me is precepting students, teaching in the classroom, and like labs and stuff like that, and then service, which is in the university and above the university, and then Next is your third area is scholarship, which is basically the whole concept of publish or die. Um, so research. And I would say pharmacy practice, like you'll see some that are involved in some mild clinical studies. Some of us do hands-on research and such, especially if we're like a big institution. You'll find a lot of pharmacy practice academics tend to be with the university hospital or something like that, so they can work with physicians or other groups and be involved with actually small clinical trials or maybe large ones. I've come across um, professors who have gotten large amounts of grants and everything and can test different drugs, or even ones that work with pharma collaboration. But I would say majority of our stuff is very small focused, just because of time even. Um, and going back to that then is the whole concept of if you're doing a study, you're interviewing with patients, you're collecting data, you get to manage all that, you're on a time schedule along with your normal job that you have. So you do this research, you're publishing stuff. This could be like books, book chapters. You will probably be doing peer reviewing journal articles. Like that's the best part is I will get like probably 10 to 15 articles I'm asked to review from editors for journals throughout the year, and that'll take a few hours as you basically read a paper, evaluate, and say, oh yeah, I think this should be published, or give feedback to the authors, and then the editor decides yes or no and kick back to you. I just got done reviewing a huge grant from a federal body, and that was quite a process. I probably spent longer on that than I thought I would, and it's fascinating because like you don't really know that all this stuff is going on, but it's like all this stuff that you have to juggle. And I often find like new faculty when they come on, they think, okay, it's teaching this. Oh, I'm getting practice set up. Oh, now I have these new meetings, committees I'm in charge of, and I have to like get a publication out. My research reached this point. What conference can I present this poster at? Okay, who do I submit this article to? How long does it take to write this paper? This year has probably been one of my busiest years I've ever had. And that's been a surprise to me because I thought after I had my first kid, so my kid's 2 years old now, and after I got back from paternity leave, I had to like readjust. I had to figure out how to nail down my time and maximize it. And I think that maybe has led me to be more productive because I've become much more cognizant of how much time is throughout the day. I mean, time is a one commodity you cannot bank. You just always lose it. And I think that's actually made me more productive. So this year alone, I think I've given probably over 6 to 8 national presentations and even one international presentation, and have submitted 2 book chapters, submitted 4 articles for peer reviewed. I still have another 4 I'm working on, and I'm wondering if I can get that done before this academic cycle ends in July for me. So I'm gonna probably work a lot over the holidays trying to get these publications done. And it's a long process with all this stuff, and you're constantly trying to balance all that together. So this is a little bit of me ranting. I know. If you're listening through it, I think it's just a small little snapshot into like what this job is. If you guys have more questions about it, like feel free to like leave a comment, say like, can you talk more about publishing? Can you talk more about like running a practice site? Can you talk more about what it means to like prepare lectures and such? Especially if you're like a new academic or if you're interested in going in academia, I'd be happy to talk about this stuff. I think it's the one thing I've noticed is that if I look online, there's I haven't come across any other pharmacy professors really talking about the job in detail. And especially from a pharmacy practice side, I think it's a very unknown thing. There's like no articles out on it that I was looking at, so I might try writing some of this stuff. But I thought it might be cool just to sit down and just talk about some of these elements that I've come across. But I think for a lot of people, the concept is that it's a job that you kind of just show up at a 9 to 5, and I would say it's not really, because you'll find that you'll end up giving a lot of your evenings away, weekends away for different things. Like my favorite is looking at my calendar. I can see like, there's some volunteer services coming up on a Saturday that I would say would help out one of my student clubs for. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to lose a few hours from a Saturday to do a blood pressure clinic at a public event. Okay, well, that's what it is. could be some evening events. Um, some other things that come up is like, for instance, right now I just got a article I did submit, got back from the editor, from reviewers. Reviewer number one had like 2 sentences saying good to go, and reviewer number two, of course, submitted back like not as terrible as I thought, but at least a task list of things that I have to get through, and then turn back to the editor within a week or 2 weeks turnaround time. It's a holiday, so it's a little mixed right now. So like I think I get more permission right now. So, but I'm thinking like, okay, sometime with this Thanksgiving break, I'm going to be sitting down here and working, trying to edit and submit a paper back to a colleague to review, who's going to be on their time then to get back to me to then submit back to the journal. So that's, this interprofessional or interpersonal relationships. And this other co-author isn't even at my university. They're at a different university who I talk to a few times a year on a film, but communicate mostly through email. So it's like, I think about like these types of things in terms of like what I have to like constantly have as a task list. I've tried different things over the years. I've tried notebooks. I've tried just doing post-it notes, and then my desk fills up with post-it notes and I throw them away accidentally, and I realized, oh yeah, it was a project I was thinking about doing years ago that is gone. Keeping notes on my phone, I still haven't figured out the magic to it. I've seen other faculty what they do, and they have like these little holy bibles of like notebooks that they keep, or task planners. I think if they ever lost them, their world would end. But so like mine's so fragmented, I guess I'll just recover at one point or whatever. But yeah, so I'm gonna wrap up. So that's just me just talking on the basics of things that you may not even have known that go on in terms of like a pharmacy professor job. I will probably do a few other videos coming up just talking about different areas that I find fascinating that I do, that I think aren't really well understood. And if you have suggestions, I would love them, because I would love to just get more information out to people who are interested in going to pharmacy academia or just want to know more about what we even do. Like one thing I find like surprising that a lot of students don't even notice is that for the majority of pharmacy practice professors that have a clinic site, we are not paid by that site. There are relationships that are set up with some universities where it's a 50-50. So like you may have the hospital or pharmacy group pay 50% of the pharmacist's salary, the professor's salary, and then the school pays 50%. Most people don't like that. There's some that do. There's some that really do, but most people don't like that because then you have two bosses. Like, what if you have a department meeting on campus for your pharmacy practice or faculty meeting back on campus, and there's a hospital meeting at the same time? Well, if your two bosses are going to tell you need to attend it, now you have to like determine, well, who do I answer to? So most pharmacy practice are only paid by the university, and most of us are then like that do clinical services are kind of given out for not free, but we have a practice site with the understanding that we can bring students in to learn. So it's a give and take. It's like that kind of relationship that's set up. And I think students always find it fascinating because they're like, well, how come you can like do stuff here at the hospital and then go back to campus? Like, why do you have like these, why can you jump ship? And the reality is because, well, who's our main employer? It's the university or the college that you work for, and that's who you answer to, and that's what really decides your job. So that's like one example I can think of that I think is always like a very interesting facet that a lot of students don't even recognize or understand. So anyway, this is Timothy Youngst, the Digital Apothecary. I would love to hear more comments or questions. Take care and have a good day.